Hey guys, so today we're going to talk about shock tuning for an element with IFS. After doing the IFS swap on the TRX4, I got a lot of people asking me what shocks I was running in the front. I'm running the same shocks on the TRX4 as I am in my element. I'm just running different springs in those shocks. Just for the sake of the video, I put my element back to stock. There's not really a whole lot to show you guys. If you're watching this video, then you already know exactly how this looks. I have it set up with the factory element springs and a little bit of preload like the build manual shows when you put the IFS together. A little bit of preload, stays up, you know, right about where I want it to. Just doesn't flex. You guys already know this. I can take out all the preload and get an okay amount of flex, but still nothing to really shake a stick at by any means. So this is, even managed to take one of the caps off a little bit there. So this is absolutely no preload. We already know the thing just sits on the ground. Doesn't ever want to pop itself back up. Finally get a little bit of flex out of it, but now the front diff is catching up on absolutely everything. My cure for this has been 110mm shocks. I know a lot of people are going to say, you know, that's a waste of time, blah, 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 blah. The IFS really needs a lot more range of travel than a standard axle to get the amount of flex that we're seeing and with the correct spring progression rate. So what I have discovered that I like doing is if we just 100% remove these 90mm shocks, just completely ditch them. Cool, all perfect, blah blah. We are going to use these Rc4wd RRD 110mm shocks. I really cannot say enough bad things about RC four-wheel drive, and especially their shocks, just their general quality of products in general. But this is the only 110mm shock that I have found so far that will fit the standard crawler springs that we're all used to, and that are 110mm, and that are kind of have a skinny enough shock body to where they don't hit anywhere on the element IFS. So first things first, I'm starting out by removing these two springs that the RRDs come with. I don't even use these. I have them all sitting in a side bench. The main problem I've had with these RRDs is that they don't seem to add any actual dampening. I've used everything from 40 weight to 90 weight, and they just don't seem to hold fluid or dampening in any kind of way that actually stops my rig from being poppy when I'm out on the trail. Whether I'm running Lexan or hard body, my very first spring that I've been running on everything is this. This is from Midwest Fastener. I'm buying these at my local Ace Hardware. The part number is SRM10, and there's the size of the spring and whatnot. So I'm running these as my first spring. Then I'm sticking my slider in here. And as far as the Knightrunner is concerned, I have found the green TRX4 Land Rover springs seem to be about perfect for the weight that I'm running on the stock Lexan body. So there we go with that. You can see you end up with most of your progression spring at the very bottom down here on the long one, and then you just get a little bit right here. Now what I've found is that from running this really stiff upper spring, I end up getting a ton of pressure to push me back up and keep my diff off the ground, but still allow this thing to actually flex. So the lower mount location on the arm is going to be exactly the same, but the upper mount location, we're going to get rid of this drop bracket and just go straight to the rear mounting location. The most crucial thing here when you do this is you need to use a 7mm spacer at the top. If you don't use a 7mm spacer at the top, then you end up with your shocks being inboarded a ton. And on the independent suspension, it just doesn't work well to have inboarded shocks. You really want to have as much of a straight linear line of travel as you can manage. So your best bet is to use a spacer at the top. I actually have found that the Gatekeeper, that spacer kit that they sell with it, is one of the most useful little like random things to have around ever. I use that for pretty much all my projects, and anytime I start running out of spacers, I just start ordering those. Okay, so even right here, you can get a really good idea of how much better this range of motion is. We are not gaining any suspension travel. It is almost exactly the same, maybe a tad bit more down travel, but not very much at all. Our upwards travel is exactly the same if you test it on both sides. The only difference that we're actually getting from this is a much smoother shock and a much smoother range of motion. The main thing that I have been trying to find for the past probably year now that I've been running this setup is a better 110mm shock. So if anyone here knows of anyone that has any better option for this shock, then I would absolutely love to hear about it in the comments or wherever, because I have yet to find any 110mm shocks that actually offer any kind of real dampening. And I mean like literally like zero dampening at all. I've ran everything from 40 to 90 weight, and there is absolutely zero difference in these Rc4wd RRDs. I have played with the Kings and all the different Rc4wd drive shocks. As far as I can tell, they are all exactly the same shock, just a different casing on the outside. And I could be wrong about that. Don't take my word as 100% for sure there, but they sure do look exactly the same on the inside. So, second shock put back together. And you know, I really want to thank Brad Geck and Aaron Lane for everything that they've done here on this IFS setup and an Element in general. I mean, some of you may have been here long enough, some of you may have not to remember, but I, for one, was asking for IFS for a long time before this kit was offered. I know a lot of other people were too. There were a lot of people doing like twin hammer setups and all kinds of custom stuff that I never got into. But thankfully, Element released this setup here. And really, I think the only thing that happened is they just didn't replace the shocks in their normal kits to their IFS. And honestly, it makes sense to me because it would have raised the price tag so much to include quality shocks like what Factory Team does. That's the actual right travel for this. So I'm really just not surprised at all that this is what they chose to do. But if it was me, this is what I think needs to be done. Now you can see how much softer it is. Right now there's no body in it, and you can also see that I have quite a bit of forward weight bias. So this green Land Rover spring might not be the best answer for everyone, but for me and the amount of weight that I run and how I like to run, this is the best option for me. I really like how this Tacoma drives. It is by far my most driven and my favorite truck as far as IFS trucks go. This is just a fantastic truck. Thank you, Element. So this is with no preload, and you can see we're actually getting some range of motion here. One thing that's key about the Element IFS is a lot of this has to do with actual driving style. So if you actually offset the weight, I'm on the back left tire here with one hand and right here, then this thing flexes like crazy. But if you don't have any weight on the opposing corner of the tire, then right about here, once it really starts to hit that second coil, that silver coil, that really stiff one from Ace Hardware, it's having a hard time pushing that part up. At least as far as if you only have weight pushing up on this one tire. So once again, that really comes into actual driving style. It's just stiff enough to keep it up off the ground, but it's soft enough to where it's just, I mean, honestly, it's really soft. All I want is better dampening, because what happens is you'll get up and you'll have this one tire flex, and then all of a sudden you'll get this happening, like you went from a flex to it pushing up, and you're sitting at full lock. So truthfully, if I could just find a shock that actually offers dampening, then that would be the end all be all for me. So just to reiterate, this is 100% stock Element. The only thing that I've changed is the shocks. I've never had issues with ring gears. I've never had to shim anything. I've always ran Element drive lines. If you run Element drive lines, and they will shim that pinion correctly. Just because of where the through pin, the cross pin goes. All stock steering. I've tried the Bauhaus stuff. I'm not a fan. I've tried the Knight Customs kit. I'm not a fan. Brad Geck and Aaron Lane, they really hit the nail on the head with this one. People can disagree with me, that's fine. Let me know in the comments. But for me, and for my wheeling style, this is perfect. I've done a lot of 1-1 wheeling before I got into RC cars. I've seen a lot of Toyotas, you know, up on the trail wheeling. This is exactly what they look like. One thing I really like about the IFS versus straight axle, especially after doing the shock mod, is that it's way more predictable than a straight axle. If I want to go do a hill climb or some kind of weird precarious maneuver, I can do the same thing predictably over and over again with this. Whereas with a straight axle, it's really kind of luck of the draw a lot of times, depending on how you hit a hill, exactly how it bounces you around. It is not nearly as predictable and stable as running one of these IFS systems off-road. I don't think IFS is an upgrade. Straight axle is better in every way except for predictability and side hilling, but I still love it better. This is my most favorite rig of all time. You know, like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. As far as the Bronco is running the same exact shocks, same exact upper spring, but it's running a much stiffer lower spring. This is just, you know, hard body life. That's just how that goes. I am running a 110 millimeter Traxxas TRX4 long arm lift shock in there. I mean, it's compressed a third of the way just when I put the shock together. It has a ton of preload on it, and just from looking in here, let's see, you should be able to see that that upper silver spring is compressing way more than it is on the other one. But I still get a ton of flux out of it, as you've seen in the video. I really, with this guy, simply need dampening, because that would give me a much more predictable crawling experience. So once again, that is simply same exact upper spring, and then a TRX4 long arm lower spring. Here are the differences right here. This one right here is a TRX4 90mm spring. It's no, this is an axial spring, but they're the same length. It's a white one. It's a 2.5 pound per square inch. This one is a TRX4 long arm spring. It's a white one. I don't remember exactly what the pound rating is on it. This one was too soft, so I'm running the orange one on the Bronco. It really is a trial and error game. No matter what, I always like to choose my springs first, get those set up very first thing. And then once the springs are set up, then you do your dampening afterwards, because the only thing you're trying to fight is the poppiness of it. So either way, I hope you guys enjoyed. I had a lot of people ask what I was running for my front suspension, and that's what it is. This is why I'm always telling people stock element for me is perfectly fine. The only thing is, in my opinion, is 110mm shocks, and this is exactly how I've done it. So I hope you enjoy, and see you next time.